From the outside, ancient Egypt looked unstoppable. Its pharaohs ruled from magnificent palaces. Its pyramids dominated the horizon. Its people enjoyed centuries of stability and prosperity. To many, Egypt must have seemed eternal. But beneath the surface, trouble was growing. Powerful local governors were becoming increasingly independent. The climate was changing. The Nile was becoming less predictable. And the very system that had built the pyramids was beginning to crack. Within a few generations, one of the world's greatest civilizations would collapse into chaos. Yet, this is not only a story of decline, it is also a story of survival. Because from the ruins of the Old Kingdom, a new Egypt would emerge. By the time the Great Pyramids of Giza had stood for centuries, Egypt was no longer the same kingdom that had built them. The immense construction projects of earlier generations had required enormous resources. Stone had to be quarried, workers had to be fed, temples had to be maintained. Government officials had to oversee every aspect of the kingdom. Over time, these demands became increasingly difficult to sustain. At the same time, local governors, known as nomarchs, gained more influence. Originally, they served as representatives of the pharaoh, but many gradually transformed their positions into hereditary offices. Their families accumulated wealth, they built impressive tombs, they commanded local loyalty, and with every passing generation, the authority of the central government weakened. The pharaoh was still respected, but his control was no longer absolute. Egypt's unity was beginning to erode. One ruler came to symbolize the final years of the Old Kingdom. His name was Pepi II. According to ancient records, Pepi II may have ruled for more than 60 years. Some estimates suggest his reign lasted over 90 years. If true, it would make him one of the longest reigning monarchs in human history. At first, a long reign seemed like a blessing. Stability appeared guaranteed. But over time, it created new problems. Several generations grew old while waiting for succession. Political rivalries intensified. Regional elites expanded their influence. And when Pepi II finally died, Egypt faced a dangerous power vacuum. No clear path forward existed. The kingdom that had once seemed invincible suddenly appeared fragile. Political problems alone did not bring down the Old Kingdom. Nature played a role as well. Around 2200 BC, a major climatic event affected large parts of the ancient world. Today, historians often refer to it as the 4.2 kiloyear event. Rainfall patterns shifted, temperatures changed. Across several civilizations, drought and instability followed. For Egypt, the consequences were devastating. The Nile's annual floods became weaker. Less water reached the fields. Crop yields declined. Food shortages spread. For generations, Egyptians had relied on the river's predictability. Now that certainty was disappearing. As harvests failed, hunger increased. Communities struggled to survive. Confidence in the pharaoh's ability to maintain Ma'ashat, the sacred order of the world, began to fade. If the king was chosen by the gods, why was Egypt suffering? It was a dangerous question, and more people were beginning to ask it. Eventually, the combined pressures proved too great. The Old Kingdom collapsed. Central authority weakened dramatically. Regional rulers competed for power. Different parts of Egypt followed their own leaders. The kingdom fractured. Historians call this period the First Intermediate Period. For centuries, it was often portrayed as an age of complete chaos. Ancient writers described disorder, famine, and violence. Modern historians believe the reality was more complex. Some regions certainly suffered. Others adapted and continued functioning. Yet one fact remains clear. The unified Egypt of the pyramid builders no longer existed. The age of centralized royal power had ended. For the first time since Narmer, Egypt was divided. Many civilizations throughout history have collapsed and disappeared forever. Ancient Egypt did not, and that makes what happened next even more remarkable. Far to the south, a city called Thebes was growing in importance. Located in Upper Egypt, Thebes had survived the crisis better than many other regions. Its rulers became increasingly powerful. They viewed themselves as the rightful heirs of Egypt's traditions. Among them emerged a leader named Mentuhotep II. Mentuhotep was ambitious. He believed Egypt could be united once again. Through diplomacy, military campaigns, and political skill, he gradually expanded his authority. Year after year, his influence grew. Eventually, his forces defeated rival rulers in Lower Egypt. For the second time in history, the two lands became one kingdom. Egypt had been reborn. The achievement was extraordinary. A civilization that had nearly collapsed managed to restore its unity. Mentuhotep became one of the most important rulers many people have never heard of. Without him, ancient Egypt's story might have ended centuries before the new kingdom ever began. The reunification of Egypt marked the beginning of what historians call the Middle Kingdom. Many scholars consider this one of the most successful periods in Egyptian history. The government became more organized, trade expanded, agriculture recovered, and confidence slowly returned. Unlike some rulers of the Old Kingdom, Middle Kingdom pharaohs often presented themselves as guardians of the people rather than distant divine figures. They worked to strengthen administration throughout the country. Infrastructure improved. Irrigation systems expanded. Economic activity increased. Egypt once again became prosperous. But the Middle Kingdom would be remembered for more than political stability. It also witnessed a remarkable cultural flowering. For the first time, literature flourished on a large scale. Writers produced stories, poetry, instructions, and reflections that survive to this day. One famous work is The Tale of Sinuhe. It tells the story of an Egyptian official forced into exile before eventually returning home. Another beloved text is The Tale of the Shipwrecked Sailor. Filled with adventure and wonder, it remains one of the oldest surviving stories in world literature. These works reveal something important. Ancient Egyptians were not merely builders of monuments. They were storytellers, thinkers, writers, people who wrestled with many of the same emotions and questions we face today. Fear, hope, ambition, loss, and the search for meaning. If you've enjoyed learning about this lesser-known chapter of Egyptian history, leave a comment and tell us which period fascinates you most: the Old Kingdom, the Middle Kingdom, or the New Kingdom. We'd love to hear your thoughts. While kings and officials shaped history, most Egyptians lived very different lives. The majority were farmers. Their daily routines followed the rhythms of the Nile. They planted crops after the floodwaters receded. They harvested grain during the dry season, and they worked hard to support their families. Bread formed the foundation of most diets. Beer was consumed regularly by men, women, and even children. Vegetables, fruits, and fish supplemented daily meals. For ordinary people, life was demanding, but often predictable. Education offered one path to advancement. Young boys who became scribes could rise within government administration. Scribes enjoyed prestige and opportunities unavailable to most farmers. Their ability to read and write made them essential to Egyptian society. Meanwhile, another beloved feature of Egyptian life continued to gain importance: cats. The Egyptians admired cats for protecting grain supplies from rodents. Over time, cats became associated with the goddess Bastet. They were respected, celebrated, and sometimes even mummified. Their place in Egyptian culture became legendary. As stability returned, Egypt once again turned its attention beyond its borders. One region attracted particular interest: Nubia. Located to the south, Nubia possessed valuable resources including gold, ivory, and exotic goods. Middle Kingdom rulers sought greater control over the region. Among the most effective pharaohs was Senusret III. A skilled military leader, he launched campaigns into Nubia and strengthened Egypt's southern frontier. Massive fortresses were built along the Nile. Trade routes were secured. Egypt's influence expanded. For a time, the kingdom appeared stronger than ever. The lessons learned from the collapse of the Old Kingdom seemed to have created a more resilient state. But history rarely moves in a straight line. Another crisis was already approaching. The collapse of the Old Kingdom could have ended Egypt's story. Instead, it transformed it. Out of political fragmentation, climate disaster, and social upheaval emerged a new era of stability and cultural achievement. The Middle Kingdom proved that Egypt was capable of rebuilding itself even after its darkest moments. But this period of recovery would not last forever. New challenges were gathering beyond Egypt's borders. Foreign invaders were coming, and they would introduce weapons, technologies, and tactics that would change Egyptian history forever. Thank you for watching Crowned History. If you enjoyed this episode, consider subscribing and joining our growing community of history enthusiasts. And let us know in the comments, do you think climate change or political weakness played the bigger role in the collapse of the Old Kingdom? In our next episode, Invaders and Empire, we will witness the arrival of the Hyksos, the rise of Egypt's greatest warriors, and the birth of a true Egyptian empire. We'll see you in episode 4.